The summer heat hung thick over the sleepy town of Riverview, but Sarah couldn't feel it. A chill had settled deep within her, a constant companion ever since that fateful night when she'd found Emma's lifeless body. Sarah stared at the last message on Emma's phone, her fingers trembling as she read the words again. The shadows. They won't stop whispering. Her best friend's final plea echoed in Sarah's mind, a haunting refrain that had tormented her for weeks. Riverview had always been a tight-knit community, but the recent string of suicides had cast a pall over the town. Neighbors huddled in their homes, locking their doors against the encroaching darkness. Whispers of a cursed video on the social media platform FlickReels fueled the growing sense of unease. Sarah sank onto Emma's bed, the mattress still bearing the imprint of her friend's restless form. She remembered the last time she'd seen Emma, the haunted look in her eyes, the way she'd flinched at every shadow that flickered across the wall. "What happened to you, Em?" Sarah whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "What did you see?" The notification had come at 3:47 a.m., jolting Emma awake from a fitful sleep. She stared at the FlickReels app, her heart pounding as a new video appeared at the top of her feed, its thumbnail a swirling vortex of shadows. Curiosity and dread warred within her. Emma knew she should delete the app, shut off her phone, and try to sleep. But the allure of the unknown was too strong. With a trembling finger, she tapped the video. The screen erupted in a cacophony of distorted voices, a symphony of whispers that seemed to burrow into her mind. Shadowy figures danced at the periphery, their movements jerky and unnatural. Emma clutched her head, the pounding in her temples growing unbearable. "Stop," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, stop." But the shadows only drew closer, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, but the voices persisted, worming their way into the darkest recesses of her mind. "You're not alone," they hissed. "We're always here, watching, waiting." Emma's eyes snapped open, and she gasped at the sight of a tall, shadowy figure looming over her bed. It had no distinct features, just a formless mass of darkness that seemed to suck the light from the room. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice quavering. The figure did not respond, but its presence weighed heavily on Emma, pressing down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. "What do you want from me?" she cried, her fingers clawing at the sheets. The shadows only grew thicker, enveloping her in their suffocating embrace. Emma's panicked breaths echoed in the room as she struggled against the darkness, her mind racing with terrified thoughts. "Sarah," she whispered, reaching for her phone. "I need to warn Sarah." But as her fingers fumbled for the device, the shadows surged forward, blotting out the world around her. Emma's final scream was swallowed by the all-consuming darkness. Sarah stared at the phone, her heart pounding. She knew she should call the police, notify the authorities about Emma's disturbing last message. But something held her back, a nagging feeling that the truth was buried deeper than anyone could imagine. Steeling her resolve, Sarah opened the FlickReels app, her finger hovering over the cursed video. Taking a deep breath, she pressed play. The screen erupted in a cacophony of distorted voices, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Shadowy figures danced at the periphery, their movements jerky and unnatural. Sarah watched, transfixed, as the video unfolded, the whispers growing louder and more insistent. "You can't escape us," the voices hissed. "We're always here, watching, waiting." Sarah shuddered, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the shadows in the room were closing in around her. A knock at the door made her jump, and she nearly dropped the phone. Steeling her nerves, Sarah approached the door, peering through the peephole, Relief flooded her when she recognized the familiar face of John, Emma's neighbor. "John," she breathed, opening the door. "What are you doing here?" John's brow was furrowed, his expression a mix of concern and apprehension. I saw the video, Sarah, the one everyone's been talking about, and I can't stop hearing the whispers." Sarah ushered him inside, closing the door firmly behind him. "You saw it too?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John nodded, his eyes darting around the room. "I couldn't sleep, so I decided to check FlickReels, and then the video appeared, and everything changed." He shuddered, wrapping his arms around himself. "The shadows, the voices, they won't leave me alone." Sarah placed a comforting hand on his arm, her own fear momentarily forgotten. "You're not alone, John. Emma, she saw it too, and now she's gone." John's eyes widened, and he reached out to grasp Sarah's arm. "Emma? What happened to her?" Sarah felt the familiar sting of tears in her eyes. "She's dead, John. She took her own life, and I don't know why." John pulled her into a tight embrace, and Sarah allowed herself to be enveloped in his warmth. The weight of her grief momentarily lifted. They stood there, two lost souls clinging to each other in the face of the growing darkness. "We have to find out what's happening, Sarah," John murmured, his voice thick with determination. "For Emma's sake, and for all the others who've been affected by this curse." Sarah nodded, pulling back to meet his gaze. "I'm with you, John. We'll get to the bottom of this, no matter what it takes." Together, they would face the whispering shadows, determined to uncover the truth and put an end to the darkness that had claimed Emma's life. The road ahead would be treacherous, but they were united in their resolve, their friendship a beacon of hope in the encroaching gloom. Sarah's hands trembled as she pressed play on the cursed FlickReels video. The eerie, distorted visuals filled the screen, and a chill ran down her spine. The whispers, like 1,000 voices echoing in the shadows, sent a wave of unease through her. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the shadows in the room seeming to shift and grow. Sarah gripped the edge of her chair, her knuckles turning white, as she forced herself to continue watching the video to the end. As the final frame faded to black, Sarah let out a shaky breath. She knew she couldn't face this alone. Quickly, she grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts, stopping at John's name. Emma's neighbor had also witnessed the video's dark effects. Maybe he could help her make sense of this. The phone rang, and after a few tense moments, John's voice came through. "Sarah? What's wrong?" "John, I watched the video." Her voice trembled. "The same one Emma saw. I felt it, the whispers, the shadows. I need your help. Can you come over?" There was a brief pause before John responded, his tone laced with concern. "I'll be right there." Sarah paced anxiously as she waited for John to arrive, her mind racing with questions. What was the connection between the video, the suicides, and the whispers that haunted them? And who or what was this Samuel that Emma had spoken of in her final message? A knock at the door startled Sarah, and she hurried to let John in. His brow was furrowed with worry as he stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. "Did you experience the same things I did?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John nodded, his expression grave. "The shadows, the whispers, it's like they're watching us, following us. I can't shake the feeling that something is out there, something dark and malevolent." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Emma mentioned something about whispers from the shadows in her last message. "Do you think it's all connected?" "I do," John replied, his gaze hardening with determination. We need to figure out what's behind this, for Emma's sake and for our own. The two of them settled in the living room, Sarah's laptop open as they began their investigation. They started with Emma's social media accounts, searching for any clues or connections to the cursed video. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a post Emma had made a few weeks before her death. She was talking about a video she'd seen on FlickReels, something about whispers from the shadows. John leaned in, his brow furrowed in concentration. "And here, she mentions feeling like she's being watched, that the shadows are closing in on her." Sarah's heart sank as she read the increasingly desperate messages. "Emma was so scared, John. She was trying to warn me, but I didn't listen. I should have been there for her." Placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, John said, "This isn't your fault, Sarah. We're going to figure this out and stop whatever's causing this." They continued their research, delving deeper into the origins of the cursed video. It was then that they stumbled upon the name Daniel Reynolds, a former IT worker at FlickReels. "Daniel Reynolds?" Sarah's eyes widened. "What does he have to do with this?" John's expression darkened. "According to this, he was obsessed with dark rituals and occult practices. He was fired from FlickReels after a series of incidents involving disturbing content on the platform." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "You don't think he's the one who created this video, do you?" "It seems that way," John replied, his voice grave. "And if he did, then we're dealing with something far more sinister than just a glitch in the system." As they dug deeper, the details of Daniel's twisted obsession came to light. He had been fascinated by the idea of using technology to manipulate the human psyche, to feed on the despair and darkness that lurked within. "He created the video as a gateway," Sarah whispered, the realization dawning on her. "A way to summon this entity, Samuel." John's expression was one of grim determination. "Then we have to stop it, before it claims any more lives." The two of them spent the next several hours poring over the information they had gathered, searching for a way to confront this dark force that had taken Emma from them. As the night wore on, the shadows in the room seemed to grow more pronounced, and the whispers in the air became more insistent. Sarah shuddered, feeling the weight of the darkness pressing in around them. "John, I'm scared. What if we can't stop this?" John reached out and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We have to try, Sarah, for Emma and for everyone else who's been affected by this." Together, they devised a plan, a desperate attempt to trap the entity they now knew as Samuel. They would construct a mirrored box, a symbol of containment and reflection, and use it to confront the dark force head-on. As they worked through the night, the shadows seemed to grow more restless, the whispers more persistent. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that Samuel was aware of their plans and was closing in on them. When the first rays of dawn began to filter through the curtains, Sarah and John stood before the mirrored box, their eyes reflecting the determination that burned within them. They had come too far to back down now. "Are you ready?" John asked, his voice steady. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do this." With a shared sense of purpose, they activated the mirrored box, bracing themselves for the confrontation that was to come. The shadows seemed to gather and thicken around Sarah and John as they prepared the mirrored box, the air thick with a palpable tension. The very atmosphere of the room had shifted, an ominous presence seeping into every corner, as if the darkness itself had become a living, breathing entity. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she carefully placed the final piece of the intricate device in place, her mind racing with a mixture of determination and dread. John stood beside her, his usually calm demeanor betrayed by the tightness around his eyes, the weight of their impending confrontation with Samuel weighing heavily upon them both. "Are you sure this is going to work?" John's voice was low, tinged with a hint of uncertainty. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "It has to work, John. We can't let Samuel continue to spread his influence, to feed on the despair of others. This is our only chance to stop him." John nodded, his jaw set with resolve. "Then let's do this." They activated the mirrored box, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. For a moment, the room was silent, the shadows seemingly holding their breath in anticipation. And then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, barely perceptible, but they quickly grew in volume and intensity, a chorus of malevolent voices that seemed to surround them, seeping into their minds. "You cannot escape me," the whispers hissed. "I am the darkness that lurks in your hearts, the despair that consumes your souls." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. She glanced at John, and she could see the same haunted look in his eyes, the same fear that gripped her own heart. "Show yourself, Samuel!" John shouted, his voice trembling slightly. "We're not afraid of you." The whispers let out a chilling laugh, the sound reverberating through the room. "Oh, but you should be, John. You should be very afraid." Suddenly, the shadows began to shift and coalesce, forming a towering, amorphous figure that loomed over them. Sarah and John instinctively took a step back, their eyes widening in horror as they beheld the entity that had tormented them. Samuel's form was constantly in flux, shifting between a humanoid shape and a swirling mass of darkness, his features indistinct and ever-changing. His voice was a low, menacing rumble that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. "You have brought me here, foolish mortals," Samuel growled, his words dripping with malice. "You think you can contain me, trap me in this pathetic device? I am the embodiment of despair, the manifestation of the darkness that festers in the hearts of all who suffer." Sarah steeled her resolve, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We know what you are, Samuel, and we won't let you continue to torment the people of this town, or any other." John stepped forward, his expression grim. "You feed on the pain and suffering of others, but we won't let you win. We're going to stop you, no matter what it takes." Samuel's laughter echoed through the room, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "You cannot stop me, fools. I am eternal, a force that has existed since the dawn of time. I am the shadow that lurks in the hearts of all who despair, the whispers that drive them to the brink of madness." The entity's form began to shift and contort, tendrils of darkness reaching out towards Sarah and John. They braced themselves, their hands gripping the edges of the mirrored box, as Samuel's attacks battered against the confines of the device. "You think this trinket can hold me?" Samuel hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. "I will break free, and then I will feast on your despair, on the anguish of all who dare to defy me." Sarah and John felt the weight of their own fears and traumas being amplified by Samuel's presence, the whispers in their minds growing louder and more insistent. They could see their own darkest thoughts and memories reflected in the mirrored surface, taunting them, daring them to succumb to the darkness. But they refused to give in. With gritted teeth and steely determination, they focused their energy on the mirrored box, pouring their strength into containing the entity before them. "You may be the embodiment of despair, Samuel," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But we are the embodiment of hope. We won't let you win, no matter what you throw at us." John nodded in agreement, his expression grim but resolute. "We've faced our own demons, our own fears and traumas, and we're still standing. We won't let you break us." The mirrored box began to glow with an intense, blinding light, the shadows within it twisting and writhing as Samuel's form was drawn inexorably towards the reflective surface. The entity let out a bone-chilling scream, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of reality. "No, this cannot be!" Samuel raged, his voice growing fainter as the light intensified. "I am eternal. I cannot be contained." But the light continued to grow, enveloping the entity until it was consumed entirely, the mirrored box sealing shut with a resounding thud. The shadows in the room seemed to recede, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the whispers faded into silence. Sarah and John stood there, their bodies trembling with the aftermath of the confrontation. They had faced their own fears, their own traumas, and they had emerged victorious, if only for the moment. "We did it," John breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." Sarah nodded, a small, weary smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes, we did. But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't the end." John placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression somber. "I know. The whispers may be gone for now, but the shadows will always be there, waiting to creep back into our lives." They both turned their gaze to the mirrored box, now resting on the ground, its surface still faintly glowing. They knew that they had won this battle, but the war against the darkness that Samuel represented was far from over. With a shared nod, they carefully lifted the box and carried it out into the night, determined to bury it in consecrated ground, to contain the entity that had tormented them and their town. But as they walked, the shadows seemed to linger, a constant reminder that the whispers of despair would never truly be silenced.